At certain moments you may feel that the universe is trying to communicate through signs that escape ordinary logic. A glance that arrives at the exact moment, a sequence of unlikely events, or even a silence that reverberates within you as if it were a hidden message. None of this happens by chance. Each detail may be an expression of a quantum field that connects your consciousness to the subtlest frequencies of reality. The question is not whether these signs exist, but whether your attention is prepared to recognize them without distortion. Think of your life as a wave in constant motion, where each choice generates vibrations that resonate in the surrounding field. When there is coherence, a silent communication arises, almost imperceptible, yet capable of guiding decisions and revealing paths that once seemed closed. Physics has already shown that the observer is not passive. The simple act of looking transforms the observed phenomenon. This means that your consciousness, when attuned, opens space for the universe to respond in resonance. The purpose of this journey is to experience in a practical way how this communication happens, not as something magical or out of reach, but as an expanded perception that can be tested, recorded, and applied. When you learn to distinguish noise from signal, life becomes a living laboratory where each synchronicity is a clue. The starting point is simple: to fine-tune your inner listening in order to perceive what the quantum field is already transmitting around you. When we think of communication, our mind immediately associates it with words, sounds, or direct images. However, there is a type of dialogue that takes place without voice and without explicit form. The universe does not express itself in ready-made sentences, but in signs that require a different kind of listening from that used in everyday life. This listening is less about effort and more about presence. It is not about obsessively interpreting every detail of reality, but about perceiving what arises with unexpected clarity amid the flow of events. Imagine that you are walking through an unfamiliar city. As you turn a corner, a specific song plays in a cafe, bringing to mind a decision you had been avoiding. Then someone mentions exactly the subject you had been reflecting on silently hours earlier. There is no objective proof that these events were planned by the cosmos, but there is a quality of synchronicity that cannot be ignored. This quality is what some call the language of the quantum field, a space where patterns of information circulate and find resonance with the consciousness of the observer. The rational mind may resist, labeling these experiences as mere coincidences, and indeed many times they are. However, when patterns begin to repeat consistently, it is as if a code were being offered to your perception. The difference between illusion and communication lies in the way you position yourself before these signs. If you seek to confirm prior beliefs, you see only reflections of yourself. But if you cultivate openness and curiosity, consciousness expands its ability to detect nuances that escape the rush of everyday life. To perceive this subtle communication, it is necessary to slow down the inner pace. The quantum field does not shout, it whispers. Its signs hide in the detail of a bodily sensation, in the shift of emotional temperature before a choice, or in the energy that seems to expand when a path is in tune with your deepest truth. This language cannot be translated into fixed manuals because each person has a unique symbolic repertoire. What represents opportunity for one may mean warning for another. For this reason, listening is profoundly personal and requires constant practice. Our simple way to begin this practice is to observe yourself as part of the scene, not as an isolated subject. When entering a space, notice how your body responds. Is there lightness or tension? When talking with someone, notice whether the energy flows or stagnates. These subtle records are gateways to the understanding that your consciousness not only reads the environment, but interacts with it in real time. Thus, the universe does not send signs as ready-made messages, but creates resonances between you and the world. An essential aspect of this process is humility before the unknown. When trying to force meanings, one runs the risk of turning the experience into interpretive delusion. The quantum field does not mold itself to satisfy immediate desires. It reflects patterns of coherence or disorder that exist within you. When there is inner clarity, external signs are usually sharper. When there is confusion, reality tends to respond chaotically. This perception is neither punishment nor reward, but a dynamic mirror. At this point, the importance of mindfulness arises. It is not enough to recognize a sign. It is necessary to observe the impact it generates. If an event awakens restlessness, it may be an invitation to review your choices. If it produces expansion and serenity, it may indicate alignment. More than deciphering universal symbols, it is about noticing how each event resonates in your own field of consciousness. This is the true key to communication, not what the universe says, but what happens inside you when the sign appears. In this exercise, it is worth trying a moment of intentional silence. Close your eyes and allow your breathing to find a natural rhythm. Choose a recent situation that left you with doubts and observe which images, memories, or sensations arise spontaneously. Do not force answers. Simply record the first impression. Many times the universe responds not through definitive solutions, but through small directions that demand heightened attention. This simple act of pausing and listening already creates an opening in the quantum field, allowing previously invisible information to become perceptible. The continuous practice of this listening transforms the way you live daily life. Instead of feeling at the mercy of chance, you begin to perceive that there is a web of discrete connections guiding each movement. It is not a fixed script, but a field of possibilities in constant update. Recognizing signs is, in essence, learning to navigate this ocean of probabilities with more confidence and less resistance. When you become a partner of the universe in this communication, you discover that life is no longer just a sequence of events, but begins to reveal itself as a permanent dialogue. There are moments when reality seems to respond immediately to something you felt or thought. It is as if the universe were attentive, returning an echo to what was released by your consciousness. This phenomenon is not a product of fantasy, but an expression of a principle known in the study of the quantum field. Every observation alters what is observed. The boundary between thought and event, between intention and manifestation, is not as rigid as the traditional view of the world often suggests. Consider, for example, the moment when you decide to change direction in your life. It may be a quiet choice, not yet shared with anyone. In the following days, opportunities and encounters seem to align with the new path. It is possible to see this only as coincidence, but it can also be understood as a sign that the field responded to your inner adjustment. The shift in vibration is not restricted to the inner self. It reverberates and finds ways to express itself in the fabric of events. This response is not linear nor immediate like a mechanical command. It occurs through resonance. The quantum field functions as a vast network of information in constant motion. When you alter your state of consciousness, you also change the type of frequency with which you interact in this network. Life then begins to organize circumstances that reflect this new quality. The most intriguing part is that this does not require exaggerated effort, but rather inner clarity and coherence. It is important to recognize, however, that not every experience that seems like a sign is in fact a response from the universe. The mind has a remarkable ability to project meanings where there is only chance. For this reason, cultivating discernment is essential. Authentic communication from the field does not generate anxiety, but rather a kind of calm lucidity. If the interpretation of a sign leaves you in constant unrest, it is possible you are confusing desire with response. The verification comes from the real impact that this sign has on your choices and on the quality of your inner state. A good way to exercise this distinction is to pay attention to the body. It reacts before the mind elaborates theories. When something arises as a genuine response from the field, there is often a sensation of expansion, relief, or silent certainty. On the contrary, when the mind forces meanings, the reaction is usually tension, a desperate search to confirm an expectation. The body, in this sense, is a radar that captures nuances invisible to logical reasoning. The response of the field may also manifest through time. It does not always appear immediately. Many times, a decision made today only reveals its echoes weeks or months later, when the signs become undeniable. This interval is part of the process, as it allows you to observe your own consistency. If the intention was superficial, it tends to dissolve. If it was genuine, it takes root, and the field continues to respond in alignment. This relationship between intention, time, and response is one of the subtlest points of communication with the universe. We can observe this phenomenon in simple, everyday situations. Think of when a person decides quietly to open up to reconciliation with someone. Shortly after, an unexpected opportunity for contact arises, or even the other person gives signs of approach. Or when someone deeply feels the desire to learn something new, and suddenly books, courses, and conversations on the subject begin to appear with unlikely frequency. The field, in this case, does not create elements out of nothing. It reorganizes probabilities, bringing forth what resonates with the state of expanding consciousness. This perspective, however, requires responsibility. If every thought or emotion has the potential to dialogue with the field, then cultivating clarity becomes fundamental. It is not about rigidly controlling everything you feel or think, but about acknowledging that your vibration influences the quality of the responses you receive. States of confusion tend to generate confusing signs. States of presence and coherence favor more consistent responses. This understanding shifts the role from victim of chance to active participant in the quantum fabric of reality. An exercise that can reveal this dynamic is to choose an important theme or question in your life and then dedicate a few minutes to quieting the mind. Allow a word, image, or sensation to arise spontaneously. In the following days, carefully observe the events that orbit this theme. Often, the field responds not literally, but symbolically. It is up to you to record these signs and evaluate whether there is consistency between them and your initial intention. The simple act of observing carefully already creates space for communication to become clearer. In the end, the response of the universe is less about revealing hidden secrets and more about expanding your sensitivity. When you learn to notice what vibrates in tune with your inner state, you discover that life is an active mirror, continuously reflecting the quality of your consciousness. The field does not speak in ready-made sentences, but in symphonies of coincidences, subtle movements, and silent signs. Being available for this listening is, in itself, a path of transformation. If there is a key capable of opening dialogue with the universe, that key is silence. Not external silence, but the one that settles within, when mental noise loses strength and attention rests in a more receptive state. It is in this space that the quantum field reveals its signs with greater clarity, as if the absence of interference created a clean canvas for reality to project its response. The human mind has been trained to seek quick explanations. In the face of any event, the need arises to label it, to fit it into already known stories. But the universe does not speak in the language of automatic conclusions. Its communication happens in frequencies that are lost when the observer is impatient. Inner silence works as a translator because it offers time and clarity for subtle patterns to become perceptible. Without this pause, everything mixes into the same noise. Imagine the scene of a lake stirred by strong winds. The surface is murky, reflecting only fragments of the sky. Now imagine the same lake in complete stillness. Every detail of the horizon is projected in a crystalline way. Inner silence works in the same way, allowing the field signs to be reflected without distortion. That is why many traditions, even the most distinct among themselves, have always valued practices of contemplation and retreat, not as an escape from the world, but as preparation to see it with greater precision. At this point, an inevitable question arises: how to cultivate this silence in the midst of everyday life, full of demands, stimuli, and concerns? The answer is not in permanently withdrawing, but in learning to create microspaces of pause. A few conscious breaths during a difficult conversation, a few minutes of quiet before making an important decision, a brief gaze at the sky without the need to interpret anything. These gestures, seemingly simple, work as gateways for the field to become audible. Some people think that silence means absence of thought, but what really matters is the quality of attention. Thoughts may arise and disappear. What changes is the relationship you establish with them. If you observe them without clinging, they lose the force of noise and begin to flow as part of the environment. True silence is, therefore, a state of consciousness that does not fight against the movement of the mind, but finds clarity within it. In this state, signs that would previously be ignored may emerge with renewed intensity. A simple example can illustrate. Someone goes through a period of uncertainty and decides to set aside a few minutes daily to remain in stillness, simply observing the breath. Over the days, they notice that certain images, memories, and even external coincidences begin to align around a specific theme. It is not that silence created the signs, but it allowed them to be noticed. The field was already communicating. There was simply not enough space for its message to be recognized. The relationship between silence and quantum communication can be compared to music. In any composition, the notes only make sense because there is space between them. Without pauses, the melody becomes confusion. In the same way, the universe's signs stand out because there are intervals of stillness capable of shaping your perception. Learning to value the interval, the pause, and the void is as essential as learning to interpret sound. Silence also acts as a filter against self-deception. When you are in a state of agitation, it is easier to project desires, fears, or expectations onto events. But in silence, these projections lose intensity, allowing you to distinguish what is the mind's creation from what is genuine resonance of the field. This distinction does not eliminate subjectivity, but broadens the honesty of observation. It is as if silence were an inner laboratory, where hypotheses can be tested without excessive interference. It is curious to note that the more one practices this state, the simpler it becomes to recognize the signs. Not because they become spectacular, but because you learn to trust the subtle. Silence creates intimacy with the invisible. It allows a bodily sensation, a shift in the atmosphere of an environment, or even an unexpected encounter to be perceived as part of a broader communication. And in this recognition, the universe ceases to be seen as a distant stage and becomes an active partner in life's dialogue. Silence, therefore, is not sterile emptiness. It is living presence, fertile ground where seeds of meaning can sprout. When you cultivate it, you realize that the universe's communication does not need extraordinary words, but clear attention. It is in this space that each sign gains shape, each coincidence finds meaning, and each moment reveals itself as an ongoing message. Among all the ways in which the universe seems to manifest, synchronicities occupy a special place. They are events that, at first glance, could be classified as coincidences, but that carry a symbolic intensity impossible to ignore. They do not follow the linear logic of cause and effect. Their logic is resonance. Two events distant in time or space align in such a way as to create meaning for the one who observes. Imagine someone who, for weeks, reflects on moving to another city, but cannot find the courage to decide. On an ordinary day, they open a random book and read a sentence that speaks exactly about new beginnings. Hours later, they receive a message from an acquaintance who lives in the city they were considering moving to. Rationality may affirm that all this is mere chance, but for the one living the experience, the feeling is of direct dialogue with something greater. It is as if the quantum field were responding through the improbable dance of events. What is fascinating about synchronicities is that they seem to carry a component of intimate precision. The same event that would go unnoticed by one person works as a decisive key for another. This happens because the universe does not speak in fixed universal codes, but in personalized languages. Each consciousness has its own symbolic mesh, and it is through it that the signs find passage. That is why two people may witness the same fact and receive completely different messages, or even no message at all. In the study of mind and physics, this phenomenon finds interesting parallels. Psychology describes how selective attention shapes perception. What you focus on tends to multiply before your eyes. Quantum physics, in turn, suggests that observation is not passive, but influences the outcome. Together, these principles create fertile ground to understand how synchronicities present themselves. They are the fruit of an active interaction between consciousness and the field of possibilities. However, there is an important trap along this path, confusing every chance occurrence with synchronicity. The mind, when driven by the desire for control, tends to see signs in excess, as if every detail were a hidden message. This generates anxiety and clouds clarity. True synchronicity does not require effort to be perceived. It stands out by its force of impact, by a kind of immediate recognition that does not need to be forced. It is as if something inside you said, "This is for me." To distinguish between projection and genuine response, it is useful to observe the effect the event generates. An authentic synchronicity usually brings serenity, even when it points to a challenging change. An illusory interpretation, on the other hand, produces restlessness, reinforces expectations, or awakens fear. This contrast is what allows you to fine-tune your listening and trust the communication of the field without falling into excessive interpretations. Synchronicities also have the power to expand the notion of time. They break the feeling that everything happens only in linear sequence. Suddenly, something that seemed distant from the present connects directly to a current choice or thought. This break in linearity is more than a curious detail. It suggests that reality operates in simultaneous layers, where past, present, and future can intertwine in unexpected ways. By recognizing this, the worldview ceases to be rigid and begins to embrace the complexity of invisible bonds. A common report from those who intensely live these experiences is the feeling of being guided, not by an external force dictating each step, but by a living network that responds to the deepest intentions. When consciousness aligns with this flow, decisions become clearer. The person begins to trust the path, not because everything is guaranteed, but because they perceive that there is a constant dialogue sustaining their journey. It is important to emphasize, however, that synchronicities do not replace conscious choices. They are not orders, but invitations. They work like traffic signs. They can indicate direction, confirm a decision, or alert for attention, but it is up to you to decide whether to follow or not. This autonomy is essential, because without it, the risk is to turn communication with the universe into blind dependence. The quantum field dialogues, but it does not take away your freedom of choice. By realizing this, you can begin to record synchronicities with more attention. Not as superstition, but as part of a process of self-knowledge. The simple act of noting improbable events and their impacts already helps to distinguish consistent patterns from momentary illusions. Over time, the trained eye reveals a web of meanings that sustains daily life in a much richer way. In the end, the language of synchronicities is not a privilege of a few. It is available to anyone willing to observe carefully and honestly. The universe speaks through these improbable encounters, reminding us that there is a greater order pulsing behind apparent chaos. When you learn to listen to this language, each day becomes fertile ground for discoveries, and life ceases to be just a sequence of facts to become a living choreography between consciousness and field. Among all the forms of communication the universe uses, perhaps the most neglected is the body itself. We often believe that signals arrive only through external events, forgetting that our biology is an inseparable part of the quantum field. Each cell vibrates in resonance with subtle information, and this vibration translates into sensations, impulses, shifts in energy, and even symptoms that have no immediate explanation. When we learn to listen to the body, we realize that it acts as a sensitive antenna connected to the invisible. There are situations in which you enter an environment and feel, before even observing any detail, an inexplicable weight in your chest or a slight expansion in the abdomen. No concrete data has been analyzed, yet your body has already registered the field of that space. This perception is not mysticism. It is biology in dialogue with information. The nervous system captures micro-variations, and consciousness translates these impressions as physical sensations. The universe communicates through this internal radar, and ignoring it means losing a precious source of guidance. The same happens with emotions. They are not just psychological responses, but also energetic translations. A sudden feeling of calm in the face of a decision may be a sign of alignment, while persistent restlessness may indicate misalignment with the flow of the field. It is not a matter of using emotion as an absolute oracle, but of recognizing that it carries valuable data about the quality of the communication taking place between you and the universe. Often the rush to rationalize muffles these messages. Someone feels discomfort when accepting a certain proposal, but decides to ignore it, convincing themselves with logical arguments. Days later, they discover that the initial intuition was correct. This kind of experience reveals that the body has a quicker timing than the mind for perceiving certain subtleties. It reacts before rational consciousness organizes explanations, functioning as a messenger of signals that come from the field. To access this dimension, it is necessary to develop an honest listening relationship with yourself. This implies observing not only intense symptoms, but small variations. The way your breathing changes when talking to someone, the lightness or weight in your shoulders before a choice, the sudden warmth in your hands when you approach a significant situation. These details, seemingly trivial, are like codes that translate the interaction between your consciousness and the quantum field. There is a metaphor that helps in understanding. Think of the body as a musical instrument. When tuned, it responds to the vibrations of the environment in a clear way, emitting sounds that resonate in harmony. When it is out of tune, the signals become distorted, and perception loses precision. Taking care of the body, therefore, is not only a matter of physical health but also of perceptual clarity. The balance of sleep, diet, and movement creates conditions for this antenna to be clean and sensitive. Another important aspect is the way the body records unresolved experiences. Repressed emotions can turn into blockages that make it difficult to receive signals from the field. It is as if the instrument had its strings stuck, preventing it from resonating freely. By recognizing and releasing these tensions, you restore the body's ability to act as a translator of subtle information. In this process, self-awareness practices, such as attentive breathing or conscious movements, work as tuning tools. What is curious is that over time, bodily listening becomes almost immediate. You learn to trust the sensation of expansion as an indication of a fertile path and to respect the tightness as a warning of misalignment. This trust is not blind, but built by repeated observation, that the internal signals correspond to how events unfold. Little by little, the body ceases to be merely a biological vehicle and comes to be understood as an active channel of universal communication. In this sense, we can affirm that the quantum field is not outside of you. It expresses itself in every cell, in every heartbeat, in every change of energy that precedes a choice. The body is the point where the invisible meets the tangible, where information becomes sensation. When you learn to listen to it without interfering with hasty judgments, you discover that life is constantly sending clear, precise, and reliable signals. Trusting the body, however, requires disciplined attention. It is necessary to cultivate moments of pause to ask yourself, what am I feeling now? This simple attitude creates space for the silent language of the field to become audible. Instead of waiting for grand answers, you begin to recognize that each heartbeat, each breath, each subtle shift is part of a constant conversation between your consciousness and the universe. And in this intimate dialogue, you discover that wisdom is not only out there, but pulses within you, ready to guide each step. If the body can be understood as an antenna, relationships function as true mirrors of the quantum field. Life places us before people who seem to carry keys to aspects of ourselves that have not yet been recognized. Sometimes an encounter provokes expansion, bringing a sense of alignment and trust. At other times, it awakens discomfort or resistance, revealing inner points that need to be revisited. In both cases, it is communication from the universe which uses the presence of the other as language. It is interesting to notice how certain encounters seem to happen outside any planning. You meet someone under unlikely circumstances, and suddenly, that person becomes a catalyst for deep changes. It may be a teacher who appears at the right moment, a friend who presents a new worldview, or even a stranger who utters a simple phrase capable of reorganizing your entire outlook on life. These situations cannot be reduced to pure chance. They are expressions of a larger network of connections that operates silently. The quantum field, in this sense, not only reflects your consciousness individually, but also creates points of intersection between different trajectories. When two people meet, their frequencies interact. This meeting can amplify signals, generate learning, or even highlight hidden patterns. That is why someone so often becomes an uncomfortable mirror. Not because they intend to hurt, but because they reflect something that has not yet been accepted in you. Recognizing this dynamic transforms relationships into portals of self-knowledge. At the same time, bonds that generate harmony are equally powerful signals. They reveal the presence of resonance, as if two consciousnesses vibrated in tune. In these relationships, communication flows effortlessly. Time seems to expand and ideas arise naturally. The universe uses these encounters to show that paths of cooperation and mutual growth are available. The signal in this case is the feeling of lightness and reciprocal support that settles in almost without explanation. It is important not to romanticize this language. Not everyone who crosses your path is destined to stay. Some appear only for moments, yet still carry meaning. The value is not in the duration of the encounter, but in the message it awakens. Many times someone passes through your life like a brief breath and still leaves a mark that changes the direction of your steps. The universe also communicates through these fleeting instants, which function like arrows pointing a course. Relationships, therefore, are not just social bonds, but instruments of learning and translation of the field. When you allow yourself to see each interaction as a message, you realize that there is no neutral encounter. Even trivial dialogues can contain important clues about inner states and possible paths. Listening, in this context, goes beyond words. It includes observing how the body reacts before someone, which emotions are awakened, and which patterns repeat in relationships over time. This perception brings with it a responsibility to cultivate presence in interactions. To be truly attentive when you speak, when you listen, or when you simply share space with another person. Often the universe's communication does not appear in elaborate phrases, but in gestures, pauses, and silences that can only be captured by those who are available. By training this attention, you discover that each encounter is an opportunity for dialogue not only with the other, but with the very field that connects you. Over time, this view transforms the way you relate. Anger, for example, ceases to be seen only as a personal reaction and comes to be understood as a sign of something unresolved asking for attention. Shared joy is not just a momentary emotion, but an indication of vibrational attunement. Misalignments cease to be only pains and come to be recognized as necessary adjustments so that your journey proceeds in coherence. Thus, the universe uses each person as an instrument to expand your consciousness. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this communication is realizing that you are also a signal in other people's lives. Your words, attitudes, and even your simple presence can function as answers someone was waiting for. The field does not express itself only through others to you. It also manifests through you to others. This awareness broadens the sense of responsibility, for each gesture can carry a message greater than you imagine. If until now we have spoken of signals that come from outside, this is the time to reverse the perspective. Think of a person who marked your life with a phrase, a gesture, or an unlikely encounter. That someone, whether aware of it or not, was a vehicle of the universe's communication. Now imagine that at this moment you can be that vehicle for someone else. This possibility reminds us that dialogue with the field is always two-way, a living weave in which we are all simultaneously listeners and transmitters. And since we are talking about mirrors, I want to propose a simple gesture to seal this reflection. If you have ever experienced an encounter in which you clearly felt the universe sending you a message through another person, like this video and write in the comments, "I recognize the signs in encounters." This act is not just an interaction, but a conscious record that you are open to perceiving how the field communicates through relationships. When the eyes close and the mind steps away from daily wakefulness, the universe finds a different way to communicate: dreams. In this realm, linear logic loses strength, and symbols take on the role of messages. Many people treat dreams as mere random images, the result of the mind's processing of the day. However, those who observe carefully realize that they carry a quality of their own, almost as if they were letters sent from the quantum field to consciousness. Dreams do not speak in direct language. It is not common to receive explicit sentences or detailed guidance. Instead, they appear as living metaphors, where each element functions as a symbol to be deciphered according to one's personal repertoire. The same object can mean freedom to one person and imprisonment to another. Therefore, interpreting dreams is not a task for universal manuals, but an exercise in intimate listening. The field uses the images that most resonate with your individual history to convey what needs to be understood. It is interesting to note that, during sleep, the rational mind relaxes its control and the body surrenders to processes of regeneration. This state creates an opening for subtle information to pass through the usual barriers of consciousness. Many spiritual traditions consider the dream a bridge between worlds, but even in scientific terms, we can observe that it acts as a reorganizer of memories and emotions. What goes unnoticed during the day finds, at night, a stage to express itself. It is at this point that the universe can insert signals in a way that is less blocked by the filter of logic. Perhaps you have already had the experience of repeatedly dreaming about a situation or symbol that seemed to insist on calling your attention. These recurring dreams are rarely random. They function as reminders, trying to show something that, in the waking state, you insist on not seeing. They can indicate behavior patterns, repressed emotions, or even intuitions about future decisions. The field uses the plasticity of the dream to reveal content that finds no space in the noise of the waking mind. A fascinating aspect is that many dreams seem to anticipate events, not necessarily in a literal way, but as if they offered a symbolic preview of something that is in gestation. A meeting may be announced as the image of a road, a challenge may appear as a storm, a change may show up in the form of a new house or an unexpected trip. The universe does not hand over detailed maps, but sends condensed impressions that gain clarity over time. When the event materializes, the memory of the dream acts as confirmation that signals were already being emitted. Dreams can also serve as an inner laboratory. There you can experiment with possibilities without the limitations of physical reality. Conflicts unfold in unlikely settings. Encounters happen with people far away or even already deceased, and situations that seem impossible become real for a few moments. This plasticity should not be seen as valueless fantasy, but as an exercise in resonance. The field uses the dream to show how certain choices reverberate, allowing consciousness to wake up with new perceptions. Upon waking, however, contact with this material is fragile. Just a few minutes are enough for vivid images to dissolve. Therefore, a valuable practice is to record dreams as soon as you wake up, before routine steals your attention. This simple act of writing them down or narrating them aloud works as a signal to the field that you are willing to listen. Over time, this habit creates a more stable bridge between sleep and wakefulness, making the signals easier to recognize. You don't need to wait for grand messages. Often, the value of the dream lies in small details that illuminate forgotten aspects of everyday life. A color, a song, an unknown face can reveal themselves as clues when observed carefully. The secret is not to force interpretations, but to allow the symbol to mature. Just as a seed takes time to germinate, the dream's message may reveal itself days or weeks later when an external event creates the connection. Most important is to recognize that dreams are part of the same dialogue that happens during the day. They are not separate from the rest of life, but compose a complementary language. While the waking body perceives signals in events, the sleeping body receives messages on the stage of the unconscious. Both intertwine, forming continuous communication between you and the field. By paying attention to this dimension, you broaden your listening repertoire and discover that even nights carry answers. Deep down, dreams reveal that the universe does not cease to speak. Even when you rest, communication continues. Consciousness is not limited to the waking state. It expands and finds new ways to dialogue with reality. Upon waking and remembering a striking dream, it is worth asking yourself, what is the field trying to show me through this image? This simple question opens doors for symbols to become practical wisdom, capable of guiding your choices in the waking world. Since the earliest peoples, nature has been understood as a living language. Each change of season, each lunar cycle, each movement of rivers and winds was seen as a message guiding decisions, rituals, and ways of living. Today, surrounded by concrete and technology, we have forgotten this ancestral listening. However, the quantum field has not stopped expressing itself through nature. It is we who have lost the sensitivity to capture its signals. By observing attentively, it becomes evident that nature functions as a great mirror of consciousness. The rhythm of the tides reveals the flow between expansion and withdrawal. The growth of plants shows that every process requires patience and care. The flight of birds in formation suggests that cooperation creates harmony. This is not about romanticizing the environment, but about recognizing that each phenomenon carries a teaching capable of resonating with human concerns. The communication of the universe is not only symbolic, it is engraved in the functioning of natural systems themselves. A simple example is the way the body reacts in contact with natural environments. Walking through a forest, touching the earth, or listening to the sound of water awakens inner states of calm that hardly arise amid concrete. This response is not a coincidence. The quantum field manifests itself more accessibly in nature because the rhythms there are in coherence. The absence of excessive noise allows subtle signals to arrive with greater clarity. That is why many insights arise precisely when someone steps away from urban routine and reconnects with the natural environment. It is also curious to observe how nature seems to take part actively in significant moments. There are reports of people who, at decisive instants, witnessed phenomena that seemed to respond to what they were feeling. A butterfly landing at the exact moment of a thought of change, a sudden rain during a farewell, or an unusual sunset in the midst of a decisive conversation. To an outside observer, it may be mere chance. To the one living it, it is a clear sign of resonance. The universe finds in nature a powerful means to speak because it is in itself a direct expression of the field. This communication, however, calls for unarmed attention. Those who wait for grand miracles may ignore the most significant subtleties. The wind that changes direction at the instant of a doubt, the unexpected blooming of a plant at home, the insistent song of a nearby bird, each detail can carry meaning when observed with openness. Not because there is a fixed manual of universal symbols, but because nature converses with consciousness in a personal way, offering signs that echo your inner state. The relationship between human beings and nature also reveals something essential: interdependence. When we disconnect from the environment, we feel not only external loss, but inner confusion. This happens because the field that composes us is the same that sustains trees, rivers, and skies. The universe communicates through nature to remind us that we are not isolated. Every gesture that affects the environment returns as a reflection in our own experience. This perception broadens the sense of responsibility and care for the world we inhabit. Many have already noticed that, when faced with important dilemmas, a simple, silent walk in nature clears thoughts more than hours of mental analysis. This occurs because the field, by expressing itself in the elements, reorganizes perception. The sound of the sea can dissolve tensions, the movement of clouds can offer perspective, and the presence of a mountain can awaken steadfastness. These signals do not arise as direct answers, but as inner states awakened by the encounter with nature. Natural wisdom also teaches about cycles. Just as winter prepares spring, periods of contraction in our lives are not failures, but gestures of the universe indicating a time of withdrawal before expansion. When we learn to observe nature's cycles, we realize that the field's communication often occurs through time, reminding us that not everything should happen immediately. The signal is not only about what to do, but about when to do it. By resuming this listening, everyday life is transformed. Small phenomena previously ignored come to be understood as part of a constant dialogue. A ray of sunlight that crosses the window at the exact moment, the synchronicity between your breathing and the breath of the wind, the sensation of vitality when touching the cold water of a river. All this ceases to be mere detail and reveals itself as a message in progress. The universe makes use of nature because it is always present, available to all, without distinction. Deep down, learning to listen to nature is relearning to listen to yourself. The field is not distant. It manifests in every leaf, in every wave, in every breath of air that sustains your life. When you open yourself to this language, you discover that the universe never stopped speaking. It is we who need to remember how to listen. There are moments when the mind seems incapable of organizing answers. Thoughts pile up like dense clouds, and no solution seems sufficient. It is precisely in these moments that inner silence reveals itself as a portal. Unlike circumstantial silence, in which only the external environment quiets down, this silence is born of a conscious choice. to suspend the rush of interpretations and make room for the quantum field to manifest more clearly. Entering this state does not mean nullifying the mind, but repositioning attention. It is as if you stepped away from the center of the whirlwind and began to observe it from the outside. In this shift, the noise loses strength and signals once invisible emerge naturally. Many describe this process in meditative practices, but it can happen in simple situations, such as contemplating the horizon, listening to soft music, or remaining in full stillness for a few minutes. The central point is the willingness to stop searching and instead allow the answer to arrive. Inner silence acts as fertile ground because it reduces the interference of the ego. When the mind is anxious for answers, it tends to project solutions based on fears or immediate desires. This filter distorts the universe's communication. In silence, however, these projections are suspended. The observer becomes more neutral, allowing subtler information to cross into consciousness. It is in this space that many report sudden insights, unexpected clarity, or a sense of connection with something greater. There is a powerful analogy to understand this phenomenon. Imagine an antenna surrounded by electromagnetic interference. The signal exists, but it arrives distorted. When the interferences cease, the message becomes clear. The mind works the same way. Silence does not create the signal, it only removes the layers that prevented it from being perceived. For this reason, one should not expect something extraordinary to happen during a practice of stillness. The extraordinary lies in the ability to notice what was already present, merely covered by noise. Expanded states of consciousness, reached through deep meditation practices or prolonged contemplation experiences, function as intensified versions of this process. In them, time seems to dilate and perception expands beyond the usual boundaries of the self. Under these conditions, signals from the field become even clearer, appearing as deep intuitions, symbolic images, or a sense of unity with the whole. These are not experiences reserved for a few, but possibilities accessible to anyone dedicated consistently to the practice of silence. It is important, however, to distinguish between inner silence and escape from reality. Some people seek this state only to avoid pain or responsibilities. In that case, silence becomes anesthesia, not a portal. True stillness does not deny the world, but offers a new perspective on it. After experiencing this state, a person returns to daily life with more clarity, greater discernment, and an increased capacity to perceive the signals the universe continues to send. One of the most transformative effects of this contact is the change in relationship with time. In inner silence, urgency gives way to presence. You realize that it is not necessary to chase after every answer, for many of them arrive naturally when the field finds space. This trust changes the way of living. Instead of moving under constant pressure, you learn to act in harmony with the rhythm reality itself proposes. It is like sailing with the wind rather than rowing against the current. Silence also teaches humility. It reveals that we do not have absolute control over the flow of life, but we can align with it. This perception dissolves the illusion of separation, showing that individual consciousness is part of a greater network. By feeling this unity, you understand that the universe's communication does not happen from the outside in, but in continuous movement, in which you are also both sender and receiver. The message is not only received, it is co-created in the shared space between consciousness and field. So over time, the practice of inner silence ceases to be an isolated exercise and begins to permeate daily life. Even in the midst of conversations, decisions, or challenges, you can access a kind of silent core within yourself. This core functions as a compass, guiding choices without the need for complex explanations. It is there that the voice of the field manifests most directly, reminding you that the universe speaks clearly when you are willing to listen beyond words. Deep down, cultivating inner silence is an act of trust. Trust that the universe does not need to be forced to respond, only listened to with attention. Trust that the signals are already present, waiting for you to slow down to recognize them. And trust that, by entering this space, life reveals itself less as an indecipherable enigma and more as a constant dialogue, where each instant carries the possibility of a response. It is common to think of the universe's signals as gentle experiences, pleasant coincidences, or comforting intuitions. But there is a less obvious dimension of this communication: challenges. Obstacles, losses, frustrations, and personal crises often carry veiled messages that could not be conveyed otherwise. Life uses the language of difficulty to draw attention to aspects that would otherwise remain hidden. When something does not go as planned, the immediate reaction is usually resistance. The question arises, why is this happening to me? This kind of questioning, though understandable, can obscure the opportunity contained in the experience. The universe does not send pain as punishment, but as a sign that a pattern needs to be reviewed. Crisis is like an alarm, not comfortable but necessary to indicate that something requires transformation. Think of someone who insists on staying in a work environment that no longer resonates with their inner truth. Small signs of discomfort begin to appear: recurring fatigue, lack of motivation, physical tension. If ignored, these signs intensify until the situation becomes unsustainable. The apparent fall is, in fact, the field pushing them out of a space of incoherence. The challenge does not destroy but reorganizes. The message the universe is trying to communicate is clear: the time has come to change frequency. Likewise, difficult relationships can be understood as language. A coexistence marked by conflict may reveal unresolved aspects within yourself. The other becomes a mirror, reflecting hidden parts of your consciousness. Though painful, this kind of signal is immensely valuable, for it forces you to look at inner layers you would otherwise not have the courage to face. Relational crisis, in this sense, is the universe's invitation to expand self-perception. Quantum physics offers an interesting metaphor for this dynamic. In complex systems, instability often precedes a leap to a new order. Before reorganizing into a more coherent state, matter goes through turbulence. Human life follows the same logic. Periods of chaos may be harbingers of deep transformation. The universe uses instability as language to indicate that a new level of consciousness is near, but requires going through the discomfort of transition. This view does not mean denying pain. Crises are real and often intense. But recognizing their communicative role changes the way you go through them. Instead of feeling like a victim of cruel chance, you can position yourself as an attentive observer, seeking to understand what the field is signaling. The question shifts from "why me" to "what needs to be seen through this?" This change of focus makes space for even the hardest experiences to become portals of learning. It is important, however, to distinguish between challenge and self-sabotage. Not every difficulty is a message from the universe. Some are the direct result of incoherent choices maintained for too long. The field does not create these situations, it only reflects the patterns you sustain. The signal in this case is realizing that your own vibration attracted circumstances out of harmony. The lesson is not to suffer indefinitely, but to recognize the point of misalignment and adjust the course. With practice, it becomes possible to begin decoding challenges more clearly. A financial crisis, for example, may reveal patterns of attachment or lack of trust. An illness may indicate excessive neglect of the body or the need to reassess priorities. A separation may open space for reconnection with yourself. Each obstacle, when seen beyond the surface, becomes precise language of the field, pointing to areas that require restructuring. This perspective also generates a shift in how you live the present. Instead of waiting only for pleasant signals, you learn to welcome what comes as part of the dialogue. The universe does not speak only through luminous coincidences, but also through shadows that demand attention. Discomfort is not the absence of communication, but another form of message. Listening with honesty means rejecting no channel. Deep down, every challenge contains within it the seed of expansion. Crisis is not the end, but the way the field has found to reorganize your path. When you understand this, even the hardest situations become more bearable because they begin to carry purpose. The universe continues to speak, even when its voice sounds like rupture. It is up to you to learn to translate this harsh language into clear direction for the next step. Among all the forms of communication of the universe, perhaps the most intimate and immediate is intuition. Unlike external synchronicities, bodily signs, or messages in dreams, intuition manifests as a silent voice within you. It does not speak in complete sentences. It does not bring elaborate arguments. It arises as a sudden sensation, a hunch, or unexpected clarity, capable of guiding decisions even when reason finds no justification. It is as if the quantum field, in its vastness of possibilities, found a shortcut to reach consciousness directly. Intuition should not be confused with a guess or a disguised desire. It is distinguished precisely by the quality with which it presents itself. A guess is born of quick reasoning, past experiences, or expectations. Intuition, on the other hand, does not seem to derive from logic. It is like a flash that arrives ready, charged with a quiet certainty. This immediate character is what makes the experience so unique. You do not know how to explain where it came from, but you feel that it is true. In many moments of life, crucial decisions are guided by this invisible channel. There are those who choose professional paths, relationships, or important changes based on something they could not justify rationally. Later, looking back, they realize that that intuitive choice was the most coherent. This happens because intuition accesses information beyond the reach of the analytical mind. The quantum field contains infinite variables, and intuition works as a way of capturing fragments of this network in real time. Contemporary science begins to explore this phenomenon through the functioning of the brain and body. Research points out that the unconscious processes immense amounts of information before the conscious mind has access. When something is perceived intuitively, it may be the result of deep processing that translates into sensation, but reducing intuition only to neurological mechanisms limits its breadth. It is not only the result of hidden calculations, it is also the language of the universe, which finds in our body-mind a channel to express itself. The greatest challenge in recognizing intuition is distinguishing its voice from mental noise. Often fears and expectations disguise themselves as intuitions, creating confusion. One way to differentiate is to observe the immediate effect. True intuition does not generate anxiety, but serenity. Even when it points to a challenging path, it brings with it a kind of inner peace, as if saying, "This is the way." False signals, on the other hand, come accompanied by haste, pressure, or the need for constant confirmation. This subtle difference is what allows discernment to be cultivated. To access this channel more clearly, it is essential to learn to trust the subtle. The rational mind seeks proof and guarantees, but intuition does not offer advanced certainties. It asks for trust, almost like a leap. This leap is not irrationality, but openness to listen to a broader dimension of communication. The universe is not limited to responding by external means. Often the answer is already imprinted within you, just waiting for you to pay attention to its silent presence. It is possible to train this listening. Small everyday gestures, such as pausing before a decision and observing what arises spontaneously, strengthen the connection. Many people report that, by practicing this kind of attention, they begin to notice that intuition becomes more frequent and precise. The field responds to the willingness to listen, expanding the flow of signals. Trust grows as experience confirms that what seemed like mere subjective sensation, in fact, translates into concrete results. Intuition also functions as a guiding thread among the different signals. Often a dream, a synchronicity, or a bodily sensation only gains meaning when intuition sheds light on it. It acts as a translator, connecting dispersed elements into a coherent message. The universe speaks in multiple languages, but it is intuition that integrates them all at the center of consciousness. Without this thread, messages could go unnoticed or be lost in fragmented interpretations. However, intuition should not be treated as an infallible oracle. It is a bridge, but it still passes through the human filter, subject to biases and limitations. Therefore, listening to it requires humility. Error does not invalidate the experience. It only reminds us that the communication process requires continuous practice. Each time you make room to listen, you learn to differentiate more clearly what is genuine intuition from what is projection. Deep down, trusting intuition is recognizing that you are already in permanent dialogue with the universe. There is no distance between the field and consciousness. They intertwine. Intuition is the channel where this intertwining becomes more intimate, more immediate, more alive. When you open yourself to listen to it, you discover that you are not navigating alone. There is always a silent flow of information crossing your experience, ready to guide, adjust, and reveal new horizons. Recognizing that the universe communicates through signs is only the first step. The real challenge is integrating this perception into daily life without turning it into an obsession or an exercise in escape. Life does not ask you to decipher every detail as if you were facing an unsolvable riddle. What is asked is openness, discernment, and willingness to act when the field offers clear directions. Communication is not completed at the moment of perception, but when you transform the signal into conscious action. This is where practice becomes essential. It is not enough to recognize a synchronicity, feel an intuitive call, or perceive a sign in the body if nothing changes in the way you live. The universe speaks, but it depends on your response for the message to take shape. Communication is a dialogue, not a monologue. When you remain only a spectator, information accumulates without real effect. When you become an active participant, the field gains space to reorganize around your decision. Daily life offers countless grounds for this integration. A conversation can bring clarity about a relationship. A dream can point to adjustments in your professional path. A bodily sensation can indicate the moment to rest. These signals do not need to be spectacular to be valid. In fact, the simpler and more repetitive they are, the greater the chance that they are authentic. The universe is not interested in creating spectacles. It seeks coherence. Its language is expressed in detail, in the smallest gesture, in the instant when you choose differently from the usual. For this integration to be possible, it is necessary to cultivate continuous attention. This is not anxious vigilance, but presence. Being present is noticing when something repeats, when the same theme returns in different contexts, when a sensation intensifies in the face of a given choice. This presence functions as a radar that differentiates noise from signal. Little by little, you learn to trust less in the mind's hasty explanations and more in the consistency that the signals reveal over time. The quantum field responds to the quality of your consciousness. This means that your willingness to observe honestly already alters the type of communication you receive. The more open and coherent you become, the clearer the signals become. This clarity is not magic. It is the result of attunement. Just as a radio station can only be heard when the dial is tuned, dialogue with the universe only intensifies when your attention is tuned. Daily practice, even in small gestures, is what keeps this tuning active. It is natural, however, for doubts to arise. How can you know whether a signal is truly communication or merely a product of imagination? This question cannot be answered absolutely. The criterion lies in experience. When you act according to a genuine signal, you perceive concrete changes in your life, a sensation of expansion, a decision that brings peace, an opportunity that opens in coherence with what you were seeking. When you act moved only by desire or fear disguised as a signal, the result tends to be confusion. It is in this contrast that learning deepens. Another essential aspect is recognizing that not all signals require immediate action. Some ask only for observation. The universe also communicates through seeds that need to mature. A synchronicity may appear today but only make sense weeks later, when another experience connects it into a network. Integrating signals is not rushing to respond to all of them, but cultivating patience so that they reveal themselves at the right time. Trust in the field's rhythm is a fundamental part of this dialogue. This daily practice also transforms the relationship with choices. Deciding ceases to be only a rational exercise and becomes an act of listening. Each decision becomes an opportunity to align with the field. By recognizing signals and acting in coherence, you discover that life does not need to be led only by the effort of will. There is a larger current sustaining the path, ready to adjust your route when you are willing to listen. This perception does not eliminate responsibilities, but it expands the feeling that you are not alone in the crossing. Deep down, integrating signals is learning to live in partnership with the universe. It is accepting that there is a greater intelligence operating alongside yours, and that this intelligence manifests in a subtle yet constant way. Daily life, previously seen as a sequence of tasks, comes to be recognized as a field of dialogue. Each encounter, each sensation, each coincidence becomes an opportunity for listening. And when you respond, communication becomes a living experience, shaping not only your trajectory, but the quality of your presence in the world. Throughout this journey, it has become evident that the universe communicates in many ways: in the synchronicities that surprise, in the dreams that reveal symbols, in the body that acts as an antenna, in relationships that function as mirrors, and even in challenges that arrive as veiled messages. But above all, communication happens in the way you choose to place yourself before life. The field responds to the quality of your attention, to the degree of presence you sustain, and to the courage to transform signals into actions. This perception does not ask you to seek extraordinary messages in every detail, but to learn to trust the simple, the subtle, what repeats consistently and brings serenity. Living in dialogue with the universe does not mean deciphering secret riddles, but cultivating a posture of openness in which each instant becomes a possibility of response. At this point, spirituality ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes daily practice, visible in choices, in more conscious relationships, and in clarity in the face of uncertainties. If you have come this far, it is a sign that this communication is already happening in your life, and that in some way this content served as confirmation. To mark your presence to the end, write in the comments, "I listen to the universe's signs." This will also be a record of your openness to dialogue with the field. And if this video brought you value, subscribe to the channel and like the content, so that we can continue together exploring new ways of understanding and living this deep communication with the whole.